I balanced the warm lasagna dish against my hip while clutching the apple pie in my other hand. Mason and Sophie trailed behind me, each carrying their own small offering. Mason held a plastic container of cranberry sauce he'd helped stir, and Sophie clutched a hand-drawn card for Grandma and Grandpa so tightly the corners crumpled. "Careful on the steps," I called over my shoulder as we approached my parents' sprawling colonial. The house looked exactly as it always had: pristine white siding, perfectly trimmed shrubs, and a wreath on the door that probably cost more than our entire Thanksgiving dinner. I rang the doorbell, shifting the weight of the dishes in my arms. Through the beveled glass, I saw movement: the flash of my mother's cream-colored sweater, my father's tall frame passing by the entryway, but no one came to the door. I rang again. Nothing. "Why isn't anybody answering?" Sophie asked, her small voice uncertain. "Maybe they can't hear us," I said, though the chimes echoed loudly enough to reach every corner of the house. "Let's try the side door." My feet found the familiar path around the porch to the kitchen entrance, the same route I'd taken countless times growing up when I'd come home after curfew, or when I hadn't wanted to face my father's disapproval. Head on. The door was unlocked. Inside, the kitchen smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, but the warmth of the scents contrasted sharply with the chill that greeted us. My mother stood at the counter, meticulously folding cloth napkins into perfect swans. She glanced up, her hands never pausing in their work. "Oh, Karina, you're early." No smile, no move to take the heavy dishes from my arms. "We're right on time, Mom." I set the lasagna and pie on the counter. 4 o'clock, like always. In the living room, my father stared out the window, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when we entered. "Uncle Walt!" Sophie rushed forward, arms outstretched for their usual hug. He patted her head absently, his eyes still fixed on something outside. "Hello there." My sister Marla emerged from the dining room, her smile too bright, too practiced. "You made it." "The kids are watching a movie downstairs." She nodded toward Mason and Sophie without actually looking at them. No hugs, no fuss over how much they'd grown. My brother Kyle didn't even bother to get up from Dad's recliner. He lifted his chin in greeting, then returned his attention to the football game on television. "Should we hang up our coats?" I asked, though no one had offered to take them. "Just put them anywhere," my mother said, waving vaguely toward the overflowing coat closet. Something felt wrong, more wrong than usual. I stepped into the dining room while the children reluctantly shrugged off their jackets. The table stretched long and elegant beneath the chandelier, meticulously set with my mother's best china, crystal glasses, and silver candlesticks. I counted the place settings. 10. Exactly 10. I counted again. 10 white plates, 10 wine glasses, 10 folded napkin swans. There were name cards tucked beside each plate. I found Marla's and her husband Robert's, my parents', Kyle's, the names of my aunt and uncle, my cousin Diane and her husband. 2 of Marla's 3 children. Not a single card for Mason, Sophie, or me. "Mom," I said, returning to the kitchen where she now arranged cheese on a platter, "there aren't enough place settings." She didn't look up. "What do you mean?" "There are only 10 places. There should be 13. Marla appeared in the doorway. "Oh, we thought the kids would eat pizza in the living room. It's more fun for them that way." "All the kids?" I asked, my voice unnaturally steady, "because I noticed 2 of your children have seats at the table." My mother's hands faltered for just a moment. "Well, Brendan and Emily are older. They can sit still through a proper dinner." Sophie tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, where are we going to sit?" The question hung in the air like a bell tolling. I glanced toward the garage door, where the folding chairs were always stored for large gatherings. The door remained firmly shut. "Good question, sweetie." I knelt down to her level, aware of my mother's eyes on us. "Where are we going to sit?" My mother cleared her throat. "Karina, don't make this difficult. We just thought it would be more comfortable this way." More comfortable? For whom? I thought of the lasagna I'd spent hours making, my father's favorite. The pie with the crust I'd crimped by hand while Sophie counted each fold. The tight budget I'd stretched to afford the ingredients. I stood up straight, no longer hunching my shoulders the way I usually did in this house. Mom, where exactly are we supposed to sit? You've outdone yourself with the turkey, Mom, Kyle said, slicing another generous portion onto his plate. Much better than last year. The china clinked as my mother beamed at the compliment. I tried a new brine recipe. 3 days of preparation. I shifted in the folding chair they'd reluctantly produced from the garage's metal frame, a stark contrast to the padded dining chairs everyone else occupied. My lasagna sat untouched at the end of the table, its cheese congealing under the chandelier light. Robert closed that Westwood property last week, Marla announced, touching her husband's arm. The commission was enough for our Cancun trip this spring. Now that's something to celebrate. My father raised his glass. Smart investing is what builds generational wealth. From the living room floor where they'd been banished with paper plates, Mason caught my eye. Sophie had barely touched her pizza, pushing pepperoni around in small circles. How's the apartment working out? Aunt Betty asked, her question directed at Meth's first acknowledgement of my existence in 30 minutes of dinner conversation. My mother answered before I could open my mouth. It's temporary, of course. That neighborhood isn't where we pictured any Thompson ending up. Weller, I corrected quietly. We're Wellers now. My father waved his hand dismissively. Paperwork doesn't change blood. Speaking of paperwork, Kyle interjected. Dad, did you handle that insurance claim for your medications? The premium went up again. My father's face tightened. Don't remind me. Highway robbery, these pharmaceutical companies. 300 more a month now. I pressed my fork into the tablecloth, leaving 4 tiny indentations. $300 exactly what I'd transferred to his account last Thursday, labeled Dad's Meds as always. At least you're covered, Marla said. Not everyone has family to help when Medicare falls short. Robert glanced between us. I thought the supplemental plan covered most of it? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother busied herself rearranging cranberry sauce on her plate. Karina handles some of the paperwork, my father finally said, not meeting Robert's eyes. Paperwork. The word escaped my lips before I could catch it. Is that what we're calling it now? Mason appeared at my elbow, plate in hand. Mom, can we go soon? Sophie doesn't feel good. My sister frowned. The kids are fine in the living room. We haven't even had dessert. Actually, Robert said, setting down his napkin, I've been meaning to ask who's been covering Emily's dance tuition. The studio said it's been paid through December, but I know we haven't sent anything since August. Marla's cheeks flushed. We can discuss that later. It's already paid, I said, looking directly at Robert. I set up automatic transfers. $500 every month since Emily mentioned wanting to quit because of money problems. Robert's fork clattered against his plate. You've been paying my daughter's tuition? Among other things. The words emerged calm and steady, surprising even me. Karina, my mother warned, this isn't the time. When would be the time, Mom? Between Kyle asking for small loans that never get repaid and Dad's medications and your property tax payment I covered last quarter? Sophie appeared in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the living room light. Mommy, I want to go home. My father cleared his throat. Nancy, maybe bring out that pie now. Karina, your girl looks tired. Maybe it's past her bedtime. My girl has a name, I said, standing up. And she's right. We should go. Now wait just a minute, Kyle leaned forward. You can't just drop hints about helping out and then leave dramatically. Paying a water bill here and there isn't exactly saving the family. A strange calm washed over me. Mason pressed against my side, his small hand finding mine under the table. Across from me, Aunt Betty's fingers squeezed my wrist in silent solidarity. $2,327, I said. The table went silent. That's what was left in my account last month for this family. Every month for the past year. I met each pair of eyes around the table. Dad's medications. Kyle's car insurance. Marla's children's activities. Mom's salon appointments she simply cannot live without. The property tax on this house. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. Karina, nobody asked you to. That's exactly right. Nobody asked. You expected it. Every month from my single mother budget while you put out 9 place settings at your table. But you've always helped us, my mother whispered, panic edging her voice. That's what family does. I gathered my purse and stood. Mason immediately moved to help Sophie with her coat. You know what I realized today? I slid the chair back under the table with deliberate care. I was always there, you just didn't see me until I stopped showing up. My father half rose from his seat. Now wait a minute, Karina. We've always appreciated everything you. No, I interrupted, the word hanging in the air between us. You haven't. I took both children's hands, warm and small and real, and walked toward the door without looking back. Behind me, the sounds of hurried whispers and moving chairs faded as I stepped into the cool evening air, breathing freely for what felt like the first time in years. An hour later, the apartment door clicked shut behind us with a finality that seemed to seal off the chaos we'd left behind. I leaned against it for a moment, still clutching my purse with white knuckles, as if someone might try to force their way in. But there was only silence-blessed, uncomplicated silence. Mason kicked off his shoes without being asked, a small act of relief that spoke volumes. Sophie stood in the center of our small living room, her fancy dress suddenly too formal for our humble surroundings, her face pinched with confusion. Mommy, are you mad at Grandma? She asked, her voice small but clear in the quiet apartment. I knelt down to her level, smoothing the wrinkles from her collar. No, sweetie, I'm not mad. I'm choosing space, not anger. Space, she repeated, testing the word. Like astronauts? Kind of. I smiled despite myself. Sometimes people need to float away from each other for a while to see things clearly. Mason appeared at my side, his 9-year-old face solemn with a protectiveness no child his age should need to shoulder. We could block their phone numbers, he suggested, suddenly sounding like a miniature adult. Dad showed me how when that guy kept calling about the roof. My heart squeezed at the reminder of how much my children had absorbed our adult problems. Let's talk about that tomorrow, I said, running my hand through his hair. Right now, let's just be us. I rose and moved to the kitchen, unwrapping the untouched lasagna and pie we'd brought home. The food I'd prepared with such care, the food that wasn't good enough for the formal dining table but was somehow acceptable when we carried it away. Who wants breakfast for dinner? I asked, opening the refrigerator. With whipped cream? Sophie perked up immediately. And chocolate chips? Mason added. Absolutely. I pulled out eggs and milk. And you know what? Let's eat it on the good plates. The good plates were nothing special, just a matched set of blue stoneware I'd splurged on when we first moved in, but we usually saved them for birthdays and special occasions. Tonight felt like both an ending and a beginning that deserved commemoration. We ate pancakes piled with whipped cream and chocolate chips on the pull-out couch, watching an old movie none of us really followed. Sophie fell asleep first, her face sticky with syrup, followed by Mason, who fought valiantly to keep his eyes open until the credits rolled. I should have moved them to their beds, but instead, I tucked blankets around them and squeezed myself into the remaining space. Our apartment was too small for 3 people. The real estate agent had called it cozy with a sympathetic smile. But tonight, the closeness felt right. We were a tight unit, breathing in rhythm, safe from the cold judgment we'd escaped. As sleep pulled me under, I realized I hadn't checked my phone once since we left my parents' house. For the first time in years, I felt no obligation to make sure everyone else was okay. The next day, the morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting warm rectangles across our worn carpet. I woke before the children, my body still programmed for pre-dawn rising despite my exhaustion. But today, the familiar weight of dread was missing from my chest. I slipped from the couch bed and put on coffee, surveying our apartment with new eyes. The space was modest, 2 bedrooms barely larger than closets, a combined living room and kitchen, and a bathroom where you could brush your teeth while showering if you needed to save time. But it was ours. The walls were still adorned with family photos, me parents on their 40th anniversary, Kyle standing proudly beside his new car, Marla's perfect family Christmas card. They stared at me from their frames, silently judging. One by one, I took them down. By the time the children stirred, I had created a small pile of frames on the kitchen counter. I left only the photos of the 3 of us. Mason missing his front teeth at the beach, Sophie with a birthday cake in her hair, the three of us laughing on this very couch the day we moved in. "What are you doing?" Mason asked, his hair sticking up in all directions as he padded into the kitchen. "Redecorating," I answered, handing him a glass of orange juice. "I thought we could use this wall for your art projects instead." His eyes widened. "Really? My space pictures?" "Absolutely, and Sophie's unicorn drawings." "Can I help?" He was already pulling the kitchen chairs toward the window. "We could put my reading bean bag right here, and it would be like a spaceship cockpit with the light." For the next hour, we rearranged furniture, creating a reading nook by the window where before we'd crammed an end table no one used. Sophie woke to the sounds of our laughter and immediately joined the transformation, insisting her half of their shared bedroom needed more rainbows, less brown. After breakfast, while the children colored new masterpieces for our walls, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened our budget spreadsheet. The cold numbers stared back at me, but they told a different story now. Without my family's emergencies siphoning away my paycheck, the columns suddenly balanced. There was breathing room, not wealth, but possibility. I could enroll Mason in the science camp he'd been talking about for months. Sophie could take ballet lessons at the community center. I could breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from Marla. "Mom's really upset. Call her?" I set the phone face down on the table without responding. Mrs. Abernathy from next door knocked around noon, bearing a plate of oatmeal cookies. "Heard you came in late last night," she said, her eyes curious but kind. "Everything okay?" A month ago, I would have smiled and said everything was fine. Today, I said, "We're working on it. Would you like some coffee?" She stayed for an hour, telling stories about her late husband and offering to watch the kids. "Anytime you need a breather, dear." Before leaving, she mentioned her church had a single-parent support group that met on Wednesday evenings. "They provide childcare," she added. "Just something to think about." By evening, my phone was crowded with voicemails and texts I hadn't answered. Each one pulled at old strings of guilt and obligation, but the knots felt looser now, less capable of yanking me back into line. "Can we sleep on the pullout again tonight?" Sophie asked as darkness fell. "Like camping?" "Please," Mason added. "I promise I won't kick." "One more night," I agreed. "But tomorrow, back to real beds." As we settled in together, Sophie's head on my shoulder and Mason's feet inevitably finding their way into my ribs despite his promise, I realized we were creating something new in this tiny space, something that had never existed in the sprawling colonial with its pristine white siding and perfectly trimmed shrubs. A sanctuary, not built of marble and money but of boundaries and belonging. For the first time since the divorce, maybe for the first time ever, I fell asleep without worrying about anyone outside the warmth of our small circle. 3 weeks later, I had just settled into my favorite chair, the one possession I'd fought for in the divorce, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I spotted Kyle's silhouette, shoulders squared like he was preparing for battle. "Not today," I whispered, stepping away from the door. The phone in my pocket vibrated. A text from Marla. "Dad called Mason's school again. Said there was a family emergency. Principal wants to talk to you." My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. 3 weeks of silence after Thanksgiving, and now this coordinated attack. The doorbell rang again, followed by 3 sharp knocks. "Karina, open up. I know you're in there." Kyle's voice carried through the door, that familiar, entitled tone that expected immediate compliance. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly through my nose. Mason and Sophie were at a neighbor's apartment, thankfully missing this latest invasion. My phone lit up with an incoming call. Mother flashed across the screen. I declined it, only for another text to appear. "We could really use your voice. The bank listens to you." The doorbell rang a third time, longer now, Kyle's impatience growing. I moved to the kitchen window where I could see the parking lot without being seen. A cream-colored Lexus sat beside Kyle's car. Marla was here too. Perfect. The Thompson family ambush, complete with reinforcements. The knocking paused, replaced by hushed voices. I knew that rhythm, planning their next strategy. In my 36 years, I'd heard it countless times, usually followed by someone telling me what I needed to do for the family's good. My phone buzzed again with a voicemail notification. I played it on speaker. "Karina, it's Dad. Look, we need to talk about the house. The bank sent papers, and you always knew how to make sense of these things. Call me back." The folder with my apartment lease lay on the counter. I traced my finger over the signature, remembering the mixture of terror and liberation I'd felt signing it 18 months ago. My first real home after the divorce, chosen by me, for me and my children. A soft knock this time. "Karina?" Marla's voice, gentle where Kyle's had been demanding. "Please, just 5 minutes." I moved to the door, resting my palm against it. "What do you want, Marla?" A pause. "It's about the house. Mom and Dad might lose it." "That's unfortunate," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Kyle made a mistake with some investments. He thought he could fix things before anyone noticed." "Crypto?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "How did you—" "He tried to get me to invest last year, said it was guaranteed money." Another pause. "He took out a second mortgage, without telling Mom and Dad." The living room window framed the small park across the street where Mason and Sophie played on weekends. We could see it from our dinner table and watch the seasons change in the old oak trees. Our tiny sanctuary. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Can we come in? I brought the paperwork. You're so good with the bank people, Karina, they listen to you." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "They listen to me because I keep my financial promises, Marla." "Please," her voice cracked, "just talk to the lender." I stepped back from the door, wrapping my arms around myself. For 20 years, I'd been the family fixer. Medical bills, mortgage payments, tuition costs all handled quietly by Karina, while everyone pretended not to notice. Kyle's voice returned, lower now. "Come on, sis. One phone call. That's all we need." I walked to the bookshelf where Sophie's latest drawing hung in a dollar store frame, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. "Our family," written in wobbly letters across the top. Nancy's handwritten note had arrived yesterday. "We could really use your voice. The bank listens to you. Not, 'We miss you,' or 'We're sorry.' Just another request for service." "Karina?" Marla again. "Mom's crying every night. Dad's not sleeping." I pressed my forehead against the cool wall. Part of me's part that had spent decades trying to earn their approval to open the door, to take the folder, to make the calls. But Sophie's words from last night echoed in my mind. "I like our home, Mommy. It's quiet here." The doorbell rang again, this time holding steady, an unbroken demand for attention. I straightened my spine and walked to the door, opening it just enough to see their faces. "The bank doesn't need to hear from me," I said, looking directly into Marla's eyes. "They need to hear from Kyle about the $15,000 he withdrew last month." Kyle's face paled. "How did you—" "I'm still on the alert system. Every withdrawal, every missed payment, all this time you thought I wasn't paying attention." "We're family," Marla whispered, clutching a thick manila folder. "Yes," I agreed, "we are, and I'm no longer the family's emergency plan." I closed the door gently, turned the deadbolt, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel a shred of guilt for choosing my own sanctuary. 2 days later, I heard the knock just as the rain intensified, hammering against our apartment windows like nature's applause for the storm brewing inside me. Mason and Sophie looked up from their puzzles spread across our small coffee table, eyes wide with unspoken questions. "Keep working," I said, smoothing Sophie's hair. "Let's see who's visiting so late." Through the peephole, my father's tall frame waited, shoulders hunched against the downpour, hair plastered to his forehead. No umbrella, no Nancy. Just Walt, soaked and somehow smaller than I remembered. I opened the door but stood blocking the threshold. "Dad?" Water dripped from his jacket onto our welcome mat one Sophie had painted with sunflowers last month, replacing the faded Thompson family rug we'd brought from the old house. "Karina." His voice sounded rough, unused. "May I come in?" The children appeared behind me, Sophie clutching the puzzle piece she'd been holding, Mason standing slightly in front of his sister, chin lifted exactly the way mine had been at the dining table that night. "It's okay," I told them, stepping aside. "Grandpa's just visiting." Walt entered our apartment for the first time, his eyes cataloging everything: the pull-out couch where we sometimes slept together during thunderstorms, the bookshelf overflowing with library books, the kitchen table with 3 mismatched chairs, not poor, not fancy, just ours. Nice place, he said, but the words fell flat between us. You're wet. Let me get you a towel. I retreated to the bathroom, pressing my palms against the cool sink for 3 deep breaths before returning with our second-best towel. Walt dried his face and hair while the children watched, silent witnesses to this unprecedented moment. I'd never seen my father arrive anywhere unprepared, without Nancy orchestrating every detail. Mason, Sophie, would you finish your puzzle in your room for a little while? Grandpa and I need to talk. They gathered the cardboard pieces without argument, Sophie pausing to look back at Walt. We're making a castle, she said, with 100 pieces. A smile cracked through Walt's weathered face. Impressive. When their door clicked shut, I motioned toward the kitchen. Coffee? Please. The familiar routine of measuring grounds and filling the pot gave my hands purpose while my mind raced. 3 weeks of desperate voicemails, Kyle's unexpected visits, Nancy's manipulative notes, and now this. Walt cleared his throat. The house is being foreclosed. I poured water into the machine, kept my back turned. I know. Kyle made a mess, bigger than usual. The coffee maker gurgled to life. I watched the first dark drops fall, remembering all the financial emergencies that had become my responsibility over the years. Car payments, medical bills, tuition for Marla's oldest, always with the same underlying message: family helps family. We never meant to shut you out, Karina. The words hung in the kitchen air, mingling with the scent of brewing coffee. I turned slowly, studying my father's face, the deep lines around his eyes I hadn't noticed before, the slight tremor in his hands that reminded me of my grandfather in his final years. What exactly did you mean to do then? My voice remained steady, surprising me with its strength. Walt stared at his folded hands. We took you for granted. You were always there, always helping. Always. He faltered. Invisible, I finished for him, except when you need money. He didn't deny it. The rain pounded harder outside, creating a rhythm to our painful dance. My father did the same to me, Walt said quietly. Expected everything, acknowledged nothing. I swore I'd never. His voice broke, and here we are. I poured 2 mugs of coffee, sliding one across the table. Here we are. Walt wrapped his hands around the warmth. Can we start over? The question I'd been waiting for, dreading. The same question that had kept me awake for 3 weeks, rehearsing answers that dissolved by morning. Relationships need to be reciprocal. The words came out clear, practiced, but not rehearsed. I can't be your safety net anymore. We know. The money. It's not about money. I cut him off. It's about seeing me, seeing us. I gestured toward the children's room. We weren't even worth extra chairs at Thanksgiving. Walt flinched. Nancy thought. This isn't about what Nancy thought, or what Kyle needs, or what Marla wants. I leaned forward. This is about my children walking into their grandparents' home and learning they don't matter enough for a place at the table. Rain streaked down our window, blurring the streetlights outside into watery stars. I watched my father's reflection in the glass, his head bowed under the weight of truth. I love you, I said softly, but I love my children, and myself too. He nodded slowly, a tear tracking down his weathered cheek. What do we do now? Now, I sighed. Now you finish your coffee. You meet my terms for any future relationship, respect for my home, my boundaries, my children. No financial requests. No guilt trips. No showing up unannounced after bedtime. And if we do all that, then maybe we build something new, something honest. Walt drank his coffee in silence. When the mug was empty, he stood, shoulders straight for the first time since arriving. You're stronger than I ever was. I had to be. At the door, he paused. Your mother misses you, in her way. Her way isn't enough anymore. After he left, I stood in the center of our living room, looking at the walls where family photos once hung. Tomorrow I will take down the last of them. Replace them with the children's artwork, with snapshots of our park days and library adventures. Our real life. Through the thin walls, I heard Sophie's laugh, bright, unworried. Mason's deeper voice explaining some puzzle strategy. They didn't need a big house or a perfect family. They needed truth, respect, boundaries. So did I. The rain gentled outside as I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Not tears of regret or anger, but of something cleaner, grief for what had never been, relief for what could now become. Tomorrow we will build our wall differently, not to keep others out, but to define what belonged within. A year later, I smoothed the wrinkles from my favorite burgundy tablecloth, the one I found at a church rummage sale last spring. Our modest dining table gleams with the careful polish Mason applied yesterday. Something about the afternoon sunlight streaming through our apartment windows makes everything look warmer, more inviting. "Do you think they'll actually come?" Mason asks, placing the last fork with precision that betrays his nervousness. "They RSVP'd," I answered, adjusting a napkin. "And this time they know exactly where they'll be sitting." Sophie bursts from the kitchen, her cheeks flushed. "The pie smells ready." A year has passed since Thanksgiving, when I discovered we weren't worth placing settings at my parents' table. A year of reclaimed weekends, replenished savings, and slowly rebuilding on my terms. The apartment walls no longer feel temporary but lived in, marked with height measurements and crayon masterpieces. The doorbell rings. Sophie freezes mid-step. Mason's shoulders stiffen. I take a deep breath and catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, straight posture, clear eyes. No hunching today. "Ready?" I ask my children. They nod, forming a small, united front behind me as I open the door. My parents stand in the hallway, looking smaller somehow. Mom clutches a poinsettia plant with a red bow. Dad holds a shopping bag with what appears to be wrapped presents inside. "Hello," Mom says, her voice lacking its usual crisp authority. "We found parking right away." "The security guard was very helpful," Dad adds, his eyes darting past me to the children. "Welcome," I say, stepping aside. "Please come in." They hesitate at the threshold, these people who raised me in a house 3 times this size. Dad enters first, bending slightly as if the standard ceiling might be too low. Mom follows, her gaze sweeping our living room in a quick assessment before she catches herself and smiles. "Something smells wonderful," she offers. "Turkey and apple pie," Sophie announces proudly. "I helped with both." "Did you now?" Dad kneels to Sophie's level, something I've never seen him do. "I bet they'll taste extra special then." Mason watches this exchange with guarded eyes, staying close to my side. "We made place cards," he says, "so everyone knows where to sit." A flash of understanding crosses Mom's face. She reaches out and squeezes my hand briefly, not demanding, not manipulating, just acknowledging. "That sounds perfect," she says. They follow us to the dining area where 4 place settings wait on my burgundy tablecloth. No crystal glasses or silver candlesticks, just simple white plates and the mismatched silverware we use every day. "Kyle couldn't make it?" I ask, though I already know the answer. "He's in Colorado," Dad says, his tone careful. "Some investment opportunity." We all understand what remains unsaid. Kyle hasn't spoken to any of us since the family home sold, since his financial manipulations came to light. "Marla and Robert will join us for dessert," Mom adds. "They're having lunch with his parents first." I nod, appreciating the simple truth without excuses. As we settle around the table, the silence lacks its old heaviness. Sophie chatters about her school play while Mason cautiously shows Grandpa his science fair ribbon. I serve food without rushing to anticipate everyone's needs before they voice them. "Karina," Dad says as I pass him the cranberry sauce, "this is nice. Your home is nice." The compliment sits simply between us, neither weaponized nor weighted with hidden meaning. Just an observation, offered without expectation. "Thank you," I replied. "We've made it ours." Mom looks at the wall where new photos hang: Mason's baseball team, Sophie's dance recital, the 3 of us laughing on a park bench. Not a single Thompson family portrait among them. "You look happy," she says quietly. I pass her the mashed potatoes and meet her eyes directly. "We are,"